did not say a word. I stood in the hallway outside the kitchen, still wearing my coat, still holding the grocery bags I had picked up on the way home from my cardiologist appointment, and I listened. My daughter-in-law did not know I was there. She was on the phone laughing a little, the way she laughed when she was complaining to her sister, that soft, exasperated sound she made when she found the world unreasonable. She had another appointment today, she said, third one this month. I had to reschedule my whole afternoon, Britt, my whole afternoon. And it's only going to get worse, you know. My mother went through this with her dad. It consumes everything. I told Garrett last night, I really did. I said, she is not our responsibility. She has savings. She can figure something out. I set the grocery bags down on the floor very carefully so they would not make a sound. Then I walked back outside, sat in my car in the driveway, and looked at the bare November trees lining the street. I didn't leave a note. Let me go back a little, because none of this started in that hallway. My name is June. I am 67 years old. I spent 31 years teaching mathematics at a secondary school in Oakville, Ontario, and I retired 4 years ago with a pension, a small investment portfolio, and what I thought was a solid plan for the years ahead. My husband, Leonard, passed away 8 years ago from a sudden cardiac event. He was 59. We had one son together, Garrett, and I raised Garrett mostly alone after Leonard died, though Garrett was already 23 by then and living on his own. Garrett is a good person. I want to say that and mean it, because I do mean it mostly. He is considerate in the ways that are easy to be considerate. He calls on birthdays. He shovels my driveway when he visits. He remembers that I don't eat shellfish. What he is not good at is conflict. He has never been good at conflict. Even as a child, he would agree with whoever was speaking to him at the time, and then quietly do what he wanted later. I used to think that would change. It did not. He married Brittany 7 years ago. She is efficient and organized, and I think, in her own way, she loves my son. But she has always found me to be a lot. She told Garrett this once, early in their relationship, and Garrett told me, the way he tells me everything with a kind of innocent transparency that he does not realize is sometimes a cruelty. She finds you a lot, Mom. She just needs time to get used to you. I smiled and said I understood, and I have spent 7 years trying to be smaller than I am. They have 2 children, my granddaughters. Zoe is 5 and Harper is 3, and they are the reason I agreed 18 months ago to leave my condo in Oakville and move into the in-law suite in their house in Burlington. It was Garrett's idea. He presented it to me over dinner at a restaurant near my condo, in the careful way he presents things he wants, with a lot of preamble about how it was just a thought and there was no pressure, and how it would be wonderful for the girls to have me nearby. I said I would think about it. I thought about it for 3 weeks. I called my sister in Halifax and talked it through. I walked around my condo and looked at all the rooms that had been empty since Leonard died, and I thought about Zoe and Harper and the particular sound of small children in a house on a Saturday morning. I said yes. I gave up my condo lease. I put most of my furniture in storage. I moved into a finished basement suite with its own entrance, its own small kitchen, and one window that looked out at the backyard, where there was a cedar hedge and a bird feeder that the squirrels had figured out how to empty in under an hour. The arrangement was informal, no written agreement, no discussed terms. I paid a nominal amount each month, $800, which we all agreed was a gesture rather than a real contribution to a Burlington mortgage. I helped with the girls in the mornings and some evenings. I cooked dinner twice a week. I stayed out of the main house when I was not invited, which was most of the time. For the first few months, I told myself it was an adjustment period, Families needed time to find rhythms. I was patient. But I noticed things. I didn't leave a note. I didn't table scheduling her yoga classes and her dinner plans and her volunteer committee meetings on weekday evenings without mentioning them to me, and that I would find out at 5 o'clock when Garrett texted to say she would be late and could I start with the girls. I did not mind helping with the girls. I minded the assumption that I was available always without being asked. I didn't leave a note that with a cup of tea that table, Brittany would smile and continue the conversation in a direction that made clear she had not heard me. I didn't leave a note and Mrs. Stogga with a cup of tea that with a costing me $220 a month, and that no one had mentioned whether this living situation was permanent. I said nothing. I made the dinners. I read the bedtime stories. I emptied the dishwasher in the mornings because I was awake first, and it was there. Then, in January, I had a routine echocardiogram. I have a mild aortic stenosis, a narrowing of one of the valves in my heart. It was diagnosed 3 years ago and had been stable, something to monitor rather than to treat. My cardiologist in Oakville referred me to a specialist in Hamilton when I moved, and I had been seeing her every few months for monitoring. In January, after the echocardiogram, she sat across from me in her office and told me that there had been some progression. Not dramatic, not an emergency, but we would need to watch it more carefully, see each other more frequently, and at some point in the next few years, likely discuss a procedure. I drove home on the QEW with the radio off. I told Garrett that evening. We sat at the kitchen table while Brittany was upstairs putting the girls to bed, and I explained what the specialist had said as clearly as I could because I am a person who believes in clear communication. I told him it was not dire. I told him I was going to be fine. I told him it would mean more appointments, more monitoring, and that I wanted him to know. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We've got you, Mom," he said. I believed him. 2 weeks later was the night I came home from the cardiologist with the groceries. I went back inside after sitting in the car. I carried the groceries in. I made myself a cup of tea downstairs, and I sat at my small kitchen table, and I looked out the window at the cedar hedge, and I thought very carefully. I had lived with them for 18 months. I had given up my condo. I was 66 years old with a heart condition that would require increasing care, and I had just heard my daughter-in-law tell her sister that I was not their responsibility. And Garrett, my son, the one who had said, "We've got you, Mom," I knew, the way you know things about your children, that he had already had this conversation with Brittany, that he had already agreed. I am not a dramatic person. I am a person who spent 31 years explaining quadratic equations to teenagers, and patience is not something I perform, it is something I actually have. So I did not make any decisions that night. I drank my tea, I went to bed, I slept, which surprised me. In the morning, I called my financial advisor. Her name is Carol, and she's managed my portfolio since Leonard died. She is brisk and practical and does not indulge catastrophizing. I told her I was thinking about buying a property and asked if we could meet. We met at her office in Mississauga the following Tuesday. I told her the situation, not all of it, just the practical elements. I was living in a family arrangement that might not be permanent. I wanted to know what my options were. I had my pension, approximately $340,000 in RRSPs and TFSAs, the survivor benefits from Leonard's workplace pension, and the equity from the sale of our original family home 8 years ago, which I had largely preserved. When Carol laid it all out, the number was close to $900,000 in liquid and near-liquid assets, not including what was still in the market. You can buy something outright, she said, or close to it depending on what you want. I said I would think about it. I thought about it for 10 days. During those 10 days, I watched my daughter-in-law move through the house with the particular confidence of a woman who has made a decision and is waiting for the right moment to announce it. I watched my son avoid my eyes at dinner. I watched my granddaughters, who did not know any of this, who wanted me to play the card game with the animals on the tiles, and so I played it every evening, and I let Harper win because she was 3 and she cried otherwise. On a Thursday evening, Garrett came downstairs. He knocked, which he had learned to do, and I let him in, and we sat in the small living room where I had put Leonard's old armchair and a lamp from our house in Oakville. Garrett sat on the love seat and folded his hands in his lap and looked at the floor. "Mom," he said, "Britt and I have been talking." "I know," I said. He looked up. "You know?" "I know that you've been talking," I said. "Tell me what you've decided." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said that the situation was harder than they had expected. That with my health being what it was, there were things they hadn't anticipated. That Brittany had concerns about the long-term picture, about what my care might look like as things progressed, about whether their home was the right environment for that. He said it carefully, the way he says difficult things, with a great deal of soft language around the edges, but the shape of it was clear enough. He said perhaps I might want to look at some other options. He said there were very nice places, well-maintained, with medical staff on site. I looked at my son. He was 40 years old, and he was sitting in my dead husband's armchair. I had let him take the love seat, but I had kept the armchair, and he was asking me to consider a managed retirement facility because his wife did not want to be inconvenienced. "I understand," I said. He looked relieved, and that was the thing I could not forgive in that moment. Not the conversation, the relief. "Give me a few weeks to sort some things out," I said. "Of course," he said. "Take all the time you need, Mom. There's no rush." "There is always a rush when someone says there is no rush." I said goodnight. I waited until I heard his footsteps go back upstairs, and then I picked up my phone and sent Carol a message asking her to start looking. I found the house in March. It is a bungalow in a neighborhood in Hamilton, about 25 minutes from Garrett's house, close enough to see my granddaughters, but not so close that I could be assumed available. It has 3 bedrooms, a kitchen with a gas stove, and a backyard with 2 old maple trees that will be extraordinary in the fall. The neighborhood has a library 2 blocks away and a plaza with a pharmacy and a grocery store. The street is quiet. The asking price was $680,000. Carol and my real estate agent worked quickly. We offered $650,000. They countered. We settled at $662,000, and I paid it outright because I could. Because 31 years of pension contributions and careful saving and a husband who had believed in life insurance had made it possible. I didn't not tell Garrett I was buying it. I signed the papers on a Tuesday. I got the keys on a Friday. I arranged for a moving company to retrieve my furniture from storage the following weekend. On the Sunday before the move, I went upstairs to the main house in the morning when Garrett and Brittany were still having coffee and the girls were watching something on the tablet. I sat down at the kitchen table. "I found a place," I said. Brittany looked up from her mug. "Oh, that's wonderful. Which facility?" "It's a house," I said, "in Hamilton. I bought it. I'm moving next Saturday." There was a silence. I watched Brittany's expression shift through several things. Surprise, and then something more complicated, and then a careful neutrality she assembled quickly because she is a composed person. "You bought a house," Garrett said. "Yes." "Mom, I didn't know you were." He stopped. "How did you manage that?" "Carefully," I said. over many years. Brittany set her mug down. We would have liked to know. We could have helped you look. I looked at her steadily. I thought about the hallway and the grocery bags and her voice on the phone. She is not our responsibility. I managed fine, I said. Thank you. I told Zoe and Harper myself that afternoon in the backyard by the bird feeder. I sat on the patio step and they stood in front of me in their boots, and I told them that Grandma was going to have a new house and that they could come and visit, and that I was going to have a backyard with big trees. Harper said she wanted to see the trees. I said she could. Zoe asked if I was coming back and I said yes, of course, whenever she wanted me. She seemed satisfied. Children are more resilient about the things they are told honestly. The move itself was unremarkable. The movers were professional. Leonard's armchair looked right in the living room of the new house, in front of the window that faced the street. I unpacked my books first, the way I always do, because a house does not feel like home until there are books on the shelves. Garrett called that evening after the movers had left and I was sitting on the floor eating takeout pho from a place 2 streets over. I just wanted to make sure you got in okay, he said. I didn't leave a note. I sat in Mississauga. There was a pause. Mom, I want to explain. Garrett, I said, you don't have to explain anything tonight. I'm tired. I'll call you in a few days. I wasn't angry exactly. Or I was, but it was the kind of anger that had already done its work and settled into something quieter. What I felt more than anger was clear-eyed. I felt the particular clarity of a person who has removed herself from a situation that was diminishing her, and I felt, underneath everything, a kind of deep and steady relief. I put the phone down and looked around at my house, at Leonard's armchair and my books and the faux container on the floor. Through the front window, I could see the maple trees at the end of the yard, bare still, but they would not be bare forever. Several weeks passed. Garrett called, and I let some calls go to voicemail and answered others. Brittany sent a message asking if I needed anything, and I thanked her and said I was fine. My sister came from Halifax for a long weekend and we drank wine on the back patio, and she said, "You should have done this years ago," and she was probably right. The cardiologist appointments continued. The monitoring showed no significant change. I walked every morning 40 minutes through the neighborhood, past the library and the plaza and a small park where there was a woman who brought her elderly beagle every day at 8:15. I started nodding to her. Eventually, we started talking. Her name is Ruth, and she taught high school English for 28 years, and now we have coffee on Tuesdays. About 6 weeks after I moved, Garrett asked if he could bring the girls for a visit. I said yes. They came on a Saturday afternoon. Zoe and Harper ran straight to the backyard when they arrived, to the maple trees, just as I had told them they would. I stood on the back porch and watched them walk in circles around the trunks the way children do with large trees, assessing them, deciding something. Harper announced that the trees were good. Zoe found a stick. Garrett and I sat at the kitchen table with tea while the girls were outside. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, I handled it wrong. I didn't leave sad at thing because he was right, and we both knew it, and sometimes the right response to an apology is to let it land. Brittany and I have been talking, he said, really talking. We're going to see someone, a counselor. That's good, I said, and I meant it. I should have stood up for you, he said. I knew what she was. I knew how it felt for you there, and I told myself it was easier too. He stopped. He looked at his hands. I took the easy way. I do that. You do, I said. He looked up, and I think he had expected me to soften it, and I did not. But you're here now, I said, and you're saying it. That's where we start. We drank our tea. Through the glass door, I could see Harper trying to teach Zoe something with the stick, some rule she had invented. Zoe was tolerating it. Garrett asked if I was happy here. I thought about the question seriously, the way it deserved to be thought about. I am, I said. I'm more myself here than I've been in a long time. He nodded, and I could see that it cost him something to hear it, and I was sorry for that cost, genuinely, but I could not pretend otherwise. 67 years has taught me that the kindest thing I can offer anyone, including my son, is honesty without cruelty. That is all I have ever had to give. He asked if they could come again next month. I said yes. I said I would make the fish pie that Zoe likes, with the mashed potato on top. His face changed in the way that his father's face used to change when something moved him, that small involuntary softening, and for a moment he looked so much like Leonard that it caught in my throat. Next month, I said. Tell Harper to bring boots. The yard is muddy this time of year. After they left, I walked through the house and turned off the lights room by room, the way I do when I am closing up for the night. I had gotten into the habit of it, a kind of deliberate ending to each day, a noticing of where I was. I ended up in the living room, in Leonard's armchair, with the lamp on and the street outside going dark and quiet. There was a cardinal at the feeder I put up by the window, bright red in the gray evening light, gone almost as soon as I saw it. Some things are like that. You only see them clearly once you have stopped moving. I had spent a long time trying to make myself smaller in a house that was not mine, in a life that had been bent around other people's comfort. I had done it out of love mostly, and partly out of the fear that goes with being a widow and getting older and watching the people you counted on make decisions about their own lives that do not include you. But I was still here, 67 years old, with a heart that needed watching and a pension, and a house I owned outright, and a Tuesday coffee with a woman who understood what it was to have given decades to other people's children. I had 2 granddaughters who would grow up knowing that their grandmother had a house with big maple trees and would make fish pie and mean it when she said come back next month. That was not nothing. That was, in fact, everything I needed. I closed my eyes and listened to the house settle around me, and I thought, this is what solid ground feels like. I had forgotten for a little while, but here I was again. There is a moment when you are standing in a hallway holding grocery bags, listening to someone reduce you to a problem to be managed, when you understand something about your own life with a clarity that is almost painful. That moment happened to me, and looking back now from this house in this armchair, I think it may have been the most useful thing that ever happened to me. I spent a long time being careful not to take up too much space. I told myself it was consideration. It was not entirely. Some of it was fear, the quiet fear that comes when you are a widow getting older and you have started to wonder whether you are becoming inconvenient to the people you love. That fear does not announce itself. It just makes you smaller, degree by degree, until you are setting grocery bags down in a hallway so no one hears you coming. What I did not understand until I had to was that a person's worth is not determined by how little trouble she causes. Brittany made a calculation that night on the phone. She looked at me, a 67-year-old woman with a heart condition and a lot of doctor's appointments, and she saw a liability. What she did not see, because I had never given her reason to look for it, was that I had spent 31 years building something, not just financially. I been the kind of person I had become through that work. Patient enough to wait, clear-headed enough to make a plan, honest enough not to pretend the situation was something other than what it was. Those things The integrity to face hard truths without flinching, the good sense to act from a place of reason rather than hurt, the plain stubbornness to keep going when it would have been easier to collapse. Those are not things that happen to a person, they are things a person builds over a lifetime through every decision that costs something. Garrett came to me because somewhere in him, he knew what he had done. He sat at my kitchen table and said the words that needed saying, and I believe he meant them. But I also know that people do not change because they are frightened of consequences. They change, if they change at all, because they decide to look honestly at themselves and find it unacceptable. That work belongs to him and Brittany. I cannot do it for them. What I can do is remain consistent in what I expect, in what I offer, and in what I will not accept, so that my granddaughters grow up watching a woman who knew her own value and acted accordingly. I think about Zoe and Harper walking around those maple trees in their boots, assessing them, deciding they were good. Children understand solid things. They know when something will hold. I want to be something that holds. Not because I need them to see me as strong, but because I am, and it took me too long to stop apologizing for it. 67 years is not the end of anything. It is a very good time to finally stop making yourself smaller than you are, to stop waiting for someone else to decide what you deserve, and to buy the house with the gas stove and the 2 old maples and sit in your dead husband's armchair and think, yes, this is right, this is mine. I closed my eyes that first night in the new house, and I listened to it settle around me. It sounded like something I had forgotten and finally remembered.